You are asleep. Your body is lying quietly in a dark room. Nothing around you is moving in any dramatic way. The air is still. The walls are silent. From the outside, it looks like absolutely nothing is happening. But inside your mind, an entire world is unfolding. You might be walking through a crowded street, hearing voices, seeing faces, noticing details in buildings. You might be running from something frightening, feeling your heart pound, your muscles tense. You might even be flying over mountains or oceans, experiencing wind against your skin that does not exist. And the strangest part is not that these things happen. The strangest part is that you believe them while they're happening. During a dream, you rarely stop and say, "Wait, this makes no sense." Instead, you accept impossible situations as normal. A person who died years ago appears in front of you, and you talk to them casually. Gravity stops working, and you float upward, and your mind simply adapts. Logic bends, and your brain goes along with it. That tells us something deeply important about the human mind. The feeling that something is real does not come from the outside world. It comes from the brain. Your brain has the ability to generate an experience so convincing that you accept it without question, even when it violates everything you know about physics and reality. And that realization is a little unsettling because it raises a question people have been asking for centuries. How do you know you are not dreaming right now? Now, the scientific approach is not to panic about that question, but to examine what it reveals. A physicist like Richard Feynman would focus on evidence. Dreams show us that the brain can simulate reality internally. They show us that perception is not a direct window into the universe, but a constructed experience. When you are awake, you feel like you are directly connected to the world. You see objects, hear sounds, touch surfaces, and it feels immediate and unquestionable. But dreams demonstrate that the mind can produce the same sense of immediacy without any external input at all. That means the certainty you feel about reality is not proof of reality itself. It is proof of a particular brain state. Humans struggle with this idea because our instincts evolved for survival, not philosophical accuracy. Our ancestors did not need to question whether reality was real. They needed to react quickly to threats, find food, and avoid danger. A brain that confidently assumes its perceptions are accurate is useful for survival, even if that confidence is sometimes misplaced. Dreams expose the cracks in that confidence. They reveal that what you experience depends heavily on neural activity inside your skull. The world you move through each day feels solid and external, but your access to it is always mediated by biological machinery. In other words, every moment of your life is filtered through a system that can, under the right conditions, invent entire universes. And once you truly understand that, the boundary between illusion and reality starts to feel much thinner than you ever imagined. During sleep, your brain does not simply power down like a machine being switched off. In many ways, it becomes more active. Certain regions light up with electrical activity, communicating intensely, almost as if the brain is running internal simulations. Scientists studying sleep with brain imaging have discovered that areas responsible for vision, emotion, and memory can be highly active during dreaming, sometimes even more active than when you are awake. At the same time, another important region becomes quieter. The part of the brain associated with critical thinking, logical evaluation, and self-monitoring, often linked to the prefrontal cortex, reduces its activity. This imbalance creates a very unusual mental state. Your brain is generating images, sounds, sensations, and emotional reactions, but the system that normally checks whether those things make sense is partially offline. That is why dreams can be so strange without feeling strange while they are happening. You might suddenly find yourself in your childhood home, then instantly in a completely different country with no explanation for how you got there. You might see objects changing shape or people transforming into someone else. These events would feel impossible during waking life, yet in dreams they are accepted effortlessly. Your mind simply continues the story. A useful way to understand this is to imagine your brain as a movie studio. When you are awake, the studio is receiving live footage from cameras pointed at the outside world, your eyes, ears, and other senses. The director inside your brain checks whether the footage makes sense, compares it with memory, and constructs a coherent narrative. During dreaming, the cameras are mostly turned off, but the studio keeps running anyway. Instead of receiving external footage, It begins producing its own scenes from stored memories, fragments of experiences, emotions, and imagination. Because the internal director, responsible for logic, is less active, the production continues without strict quality control. The result is a story that can be vivid and emotionally powerful, even if it is logically inconsistent. What makes this remarkable is how real the experience feels. Your heart can race during a nightmare. You can feel joy, embarrassment, fear, or relief. Your body can even respond physically, releasing stress hormones or changing breathing patterns, all triggered by events that are not actually happening in the outside world. This tells us something profound about perception. The brain does not need external reality to produce genuine experience. It only needs patterns of neural activity. In fact, when scientists compare brain activity during certain dream phases, especially REM sleep, with waking perception, they find surprising similarities. The brain areas involved in seeing objects or hearing sounds can activate in comparable ways, even though no external stimuli are present. From the brain's perspective, internally generated and externally generated experiences can look very similar. This is one reason dreams feel convincing. Your brain is not merely imagining in a vague sense. It is constructing sensory experiences using many of the same neural pathways it uses when interacting with the real world. And that leads to a deeper realization. The difference between dreaming and waking is not that one is real and the other is fake. The difference is how the brain is generating the experience and how much it is constrained by external input. When you are awake, it feels obvious that you are directly experiencing the world around you. You open your eyes and see objects. You hear sounds coming from specific directions. You touch surfaces and feel texture and temperature. Everything appears immediate, solid, and unquestionably real. But neuroscience tells us something surprising. You are not experiencing reality itself. You are experiencing a reconstruction created by your brain. Light does not look like anything on its own. It is simply electromagnetic radiation. When light enters your eyes, it triggers chemical reactions in specialized cells, which produce electrical signals. Those signals travel through nerves into the brain, where complex processing turns them into shapes, colors, depth, and motion. The image you see exists only after your brain interprets those signals. The same is true for sound. Vibrations in the air move tiny structures in your ear, which convert mechanical motion into electrical activity. Your brain interprets that activity as voices, music, or noise. Without the brain's interpretation, there is no sound experience at all, only pressure waves. In other words, your senses do not deliver reality. They deliver data. Your brain turns that data into a usable model of the world. This model is usually accurate enough for survival. You can walk through rooms without bumping into walls. You can catch objects. You can recognize faces. But accuracy is not the same as direct access. What you perceive is always filtered, processed, and constructed. Dreams expose this fact in a dramatic way. During a dream, your brain generates images and sensations internally without external input. Yet the experience can feel just as real as waking life. That means the feeling of realness does not come from the outside world. It comes from how your brain processes information. This is the dangerous illusion. Humans naturally assume that if something feels real, it must be real. Our brains evolved to trust perception because hesitation could be deadly. If you see something that looks like a predator, it is safer to assume it is real and react quickly than to pause and question it. Evolution favors confidence over philosophical doubt. But that confidence can mislead us. Optical illusions show that the brain can misinterpret visual information. Hallucinations show that perception can occur without external stimuli. Dreams demonstrate that entire worlds can be created internally, complete with emotions and sensations. All of this points to the same conclusion: the sense of certainty you feel about reality is generated by neural processes. It is not proof that your perception perfectly matches the external universe. That realization can feel uncomfortable because it challenges a basic assumption most people carry without thinking, the assumption that perception equals truth. In reality, perception is a best guess, constantly updated by the brain based on incomplete information. You are not seeing the world as it is. You are seeing the version your brain constructs to help you navigate it. And once you understand that, you begin to recognize how fragile the boundary between reality and illusion actually is. Scientists have been trying to understand why humans dream for a long time. And despite decades of research, there is still no single complete answer. What we do have are several strong hypotheses, ideas supported by evidence, but none of them fully explain the richness and complexity of dreams. One widely accepted idea is that dreams help with memory consolidation. During the day, your brain collects enormous amounts of information, conversations, sights, emotions, skills, and experiences. Sleep appears to be a time when the brain reorganizes and stabilizes some of those memories, deciding what to keep and what to discard. Experiments show that people often perform better on learned tasks after sleep, suggesting that something important is happening in the brain overnight. Another hypothesis focuses on emotional regulation. Dreams often involve emotionally charged situations: fear, anxiety, excitement, embarrassment, or joy. Some researchers believe dreams allow the brain to process emotional experiences in a safe environment, reducing stress responses over time. There is evidence that certain emotional centers of the brain, such as the amygdala, are very active during dreaming, which supports this idea. A third possibility is known as threat simulation. According to this theory, dreams evolved as a kind of rehearsal system. Early humans who mentally practiced responding to danger, predators, social conflict, environmental threats may have had a survival advantage. Even today, many dreams involve chasing, falling, or being in risky situations, which fits the idea that the brain is running practice scenarios. There is also a more mechanical explanation called the activation synthesis theory. This suggests that dreams begin with random neural activity during sleep, particularly in brainstem regions. The higher parts of the brain then attempt to interpret this activity, weaving it into a story. In this view, dreams are not necessarily purposeful. They are the brain trying to make sense of internal noise. Each of these explanations captures part of the truth, but none fully explains why dreams can feel so structured, detailed, and meaningful. People can experience long narratives, complex environments, and powerful emotions that seem far beyond simple memory replay or random noise. The brain is not just replaying recordings. It is generating experiences. What makes this even more mysterious is that the experiences feel real while they happen. You can feel fear without danger, joy without success, grief without loss in the physical world. That means experience itself does not require external reality. It requires only specific patterns of neural activity. This realization connects dreams to one of the biggest unsolved problems in science of consciousness. We can measure electrical signals in neurons. We can identify which brain regions are active, but we still cannot explain why those physical processes produce subjective experience, the feeling of being aware. Why does a particular pattern of neural firing create the sensation of seeing color? Why does another pattern create the feeling of fear or happiness? There is no complete scientific explanation yet. Dreams highlight this mystery because they show consciousness operating in a partially disconnected state from the external world. The brain becomes both the creator and the observer of an internal reality. And the honest scientific answer is that we are still at the beginning of understanding how that is possible. Imagine that technology advances to a point where we can interact with the brain at the level of individual neurons. Not roughly, not approximately, but with perfect precision. Every electrical signal that normally occurs when you see, hear, touch, taste, or think could be reproduced artificially. Every sensory pathway could be stimulated in exactly the same pattern that real life would create. Now imagine you volunteer to enter such a machine. The moment it activates, you open your eyes, but you are no longer in the laboratory. You are standing somewhere else entirely. Maybe you are in a city you have never visited, or on a beach with waves crashing nearby. You feel the warmth of sunlight on your skin, smell the salt in the air, hear distant voices. Everything feels completely natural. You have memories of arriving there. You have a sense of time passing. You interact with people, form relationships, learn new skills, and experience successes and failures. Years go by. You live what feels like a full life, decades of experiences, emotions, and memories. Then suddenly, the machine shuts off. You open your eyes in the laboratory again, and only 5 minutes have passed. The question that follows is deeply uncomfortable. Were those decades real? From the perspective of physics, nothing significant happened outside your brain. Your body remained in one place. No external events occurred in the environment you experienced. But from your subjective perspective, those years were filled with genuine emotions, decisions, and memories. Your brain recorded them just like it records waking life. So which perspective defines reality? This thought experiment exposes a gap between physical events and lived experience. Physics can describe matter, energy, and time in the external universe with extraordinary precision. We can predict planetary motion centuries into the future. We can calculate atomic interactions with remarkable accuracy. But subjective experience, what something feels like from the inside, exists only for the observer experiencing it. Dreams are a natural version of this machine. Every night, your brain generates environments, characters, and events internally. While dreaming, you do not feel like you are inside a simulation. You feel like you are inside reality. Only after waking do you reclassify it as unreal. Humans struggle with this idea because we intuitively believe reality must be tied to the external world. We assume that if something feels vivid and meaningful, it must correspond to something physically happening outside us. But the brain does not require external input to produce convincing experiences. It only requires neural activity arranged in certain patterns. This leads to a deeper insight about the mind. Your sense of time, identity, and continuity depends on brain processes that can be altered. In dreams, time can stretch or compress. Entire sequences of events can occur in minutes. Your sense of who you are can shift. You might be yourself, someone else, or a version of yourself with different abilities or memories. All of this suggests that what you consider your stable reality is actually a dynamic construction continuously generated by neural systems. The machine in this thought experiment simply makes that fact more obvious. And once you realize that, you begin to understand how thin the line is between the world you experience and the processes in your brain that create it. If the brain is constantly constructing your experience of the world, then reality, as you live it, is not just something you passively receive. It is something actively assembled inside your nervous system. This does not mean the external world does not exist. Physics gives overwhelming evidence that there is a universe independent of our minds. But your access to that universe is always indirect. It is mediated through biological sensors, neural signals, and interpretation processes that evolve for survival rather than perfect accuracy. This becomes clearer when you consider how perception can change without the external world changing at all. Two people can witness the same event and remember it differently. Expectations can alter what you notice. Fear can make harmless situations feel threatening. Attention can determine what enters your awareness and what disappears entirely. The external environment may remain constant, but the experienced reality can shift dramatically depending on internal brain states. Dreams are an extreme example of this principle. They show that the brain can create a full sensory world without any outside input. But even during waking life, perception is not a simple recording. It is more like a prediction system. The brain constantly generates expectations about what should be happening and then compares incoming sensory data against those predictions. When the predictions match the input, the experience feels smooth and stable. When they do not, you notice something surprising. This predictive nature of perception explains why illusions work. Your brain fills in gaps, makes assumptions, and sometimes reaches the wrong conclusion. It also explains why training and experience can change what you perceive. A musician hears details in sound that others miss. A radiologist can detect patterns in medical images that look meaningless to an untrained eye. The sensory input is similar, but the brain's interpretation differs. Understanding this changes how you think about certainty. The confidence you feel about what you are seeing or hearing is not a guarantee of accuracy. It is a reflection of how strongly your brain's internal model agrees with incoming signals. Most of the time, that agreement is good enough to function effectively in the world. But it is not infallible. There is also something quietly profound in this realization. Your fears, beliefs, memories, and expectations are not just abstract thoughts. They influence how you perceive reality moment by moment. Stress can narrow attention. Optimism can expand possibilities you notice. Trauma can cause neutral situations to feel dangerous. The brain's interpretation layer shapes experience continuously. This means that the world you live in psychologically is partly constructed from within, not in a mystical or supernatural sense, but in a neurological one. Your brain is integrating sensory data with past experiences and emotional states to create a coherent story you call reality. Once you understand that, you start to see that reality is not just something happening to you. It is something happening through you.